The restaurant pulsed with the soft hum of evening chatter, glasses clinking like faint whispers of normalcy. Beneath the golden light, Emma moved quickly between tables, her apron tied neatly, her hair pulled into a careful bun that barely hid the fatigue in her face. She smiled at strangers, with the grace of someone holding back the tremor of exhaustion. Tonight was busier than usual, but she didn't mind. Work distracted her. It kept her thoughts away from what she feared most, being alone with her memory. She hadn't told anyone that her husband, Noah, a Navy SEAL, had returned from deployment 2 weeks ago. To her co-workers, he was just a story, a distant name mentioned in passing. But to Emma, he was home again, carrying shadows behind his steady blue eyes. The kind of man whose silence spoke louder than anger ever could. And tonight, he'd promised to meet her after her shift. Just a quiet dinner, just the two of them. That thought was the only thing keeping her going. The smell of roasted garlic and seared steak filled the air, coating her skin as she hurried toward the back counter. That was when she felt it, the heavy stare of her manager, Rick. His eyes lingered too long, tracing where they didn't belong. He'd been doing that for weeks, hidden behind the thin veil of workplace familiarity. His compliments carried the sour edge of something darker, something unspoken that always made her stomach twist. "Need you in the back, Emma," he said now, his voice low and casual, too casual. She hesitated. The tone wasn't right. Something in it slithered beneath the words, a command wrapped in suggestion. Her co-workers were busy, the tables full, laughter spilling across the dining room. No one noticed as she wiped her hands on her apron and followed him toward the back hallway. The air there felt different, colder, heavier. Fluorescent lights buzzed above them, flickering once like a warning. She slowed her steps, her instincts whispering danger, but Rick kept walking until they reached the corridor that led to the restrooms. He turned suddenly, his expression twisting into something smug, almost predatory. "Didn't you hear me?" he muttered. "I said come here." Her voice caught in her throat. "What is it? I have tables." He stepped closer, too close. The sour scent of whiskey clung to his breath. "5 minutes won't kill you." Before she could back away, his hand clamped around her wrist. Firm, possessive, uninvited, she gasped, the shock freezing her in place. Then he dragged her forward, toward the narrow door of the employee restroom. Her heart pounded so hard she could feel it in her ears. "Rick, let go," she whispered, but her words died against the tiled wall as the door shut behind them. Outside, the laughter and clatter of dishes continued, oblivious. Inside, the light hummed above like a spotlight on a nightmare. Emma's thoughts raced, splintering between panic and disbelief. She had trusted the routine, the safety of familiarity, and now it had turned against her. Rick's shadow loomed over her as he blocked the exit, his grin tightening into something cruel. "You think you can ignore me all night?" he said softly, as though scolding a child. "You're lucky I even—" "Stop." The word barely escaped her lips. It was fragile, trembling, but filled with quiet defiance. She stepped back, hitting the wall. Her pulse screamed in her veins. Outside the restroom, a set of footsteps echoed across the tiled floor of the hallway. Noah had arrived. He'd parked his truck across the street, intending to surprise her early. Dressed in a plain black jacket, his presence was quiet, unassuming. But beneath it lived the instincts of a soldier who had seen too much darkness to ever mistake fear for coincidence. He knew the rhythm of Emma's voice, the cadence of her laughter, and the silence now felt wrong. His body stiffened. That stillness, that primal intuition that once kept him alive overseas, now whispered that something was off. He moved through the dining room, eyes scanning. Every step deliberate, quiet, like a ghost among civilians. He didn't see her. Not at the counter, not in the kitchen. Then he noticed the faint crack of light beneath the restroom door, and a sound, muffled, uneasy. Inside, Emma's voice broke again. "Rick, please don't." Noah's vision narrowed, his blood turning to ice. The restaurant noise fell away, replaced by the low hum of adrenaline. He crossed the hallway before he even realized he was moving. One hand found the door handle locked. "Emma," he said, softly, but the word carried steel. A pause, then chaos. Rick's voice snapped. Who the hell? The door didn't last. It burst open with a sound that silenced the world. For a fraction of a second, everything froze. Emma against the wall, Rick's hand half raised. Noah's eyes locked on him with a calmness more terrifying than rage. It was the stillness of a man who had been trained not to feel before he acted. Rick stumbled back. Who are you? Noah stepped forward, every movement measured, coiled with restrained violence. Her husband, he said quietly. The words hit harder than a shout. Emma's breath caught. The air felt electric, thick with disbelief, fear, and the scent of cold metal from Noah's watch as his hand brushed her shoulder protectively. He didn't need to raise his voice. He didn't need to explain. His presence was enough to unmake the man before him. And for the first time that night, Rick understood what real danger looked like. Rick froze, his back pressed against the cold tile, eyes darting between the open door and the man standing in it. Noah silent and unyielding. There was something in Noah's stillness that didn't belong to this world of kitchens and table orders, something that carried the echo of gunfire, sandstorms, and shadows that never left you. His voice, when it came, was calm, too calm. Step away from her. Rick's hand dropped as if burned. The arrogance that had fed him moments ago began to rot inside his chest, replaced by something he hadn't felt in years. Fear. Not the kind of fear that came with being caught, but the kind that came when a man realized there were consequences greater than reputation. He stammered, "Hey man, I didn't mean, this isn't what it looks like." But Noah didn't blink. His gaze stayed locked, heavy, unflinching, his body positioned between Emma and the man who had just crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "Say that again," Noah murmured, his voice barely audible, but his tone carried the weight of everything he'd endured. Every night he'd watched cruelty go unpunished, every memory that had carved itself into his bones. Emma could barely breathe. Her hands trembled against her apron, her body caught between relief and shock. For weeks she had told herself to endure, to stay quiet, to keep her job. But now, seeing Noah there, his quiet rage radiating like a storm waiting to break, something inside her cracked open. Her fear turned to something fierce and steady. Rick tried to smirk, tried to salvage his authority, but the edges of his confidence frayed. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is a misunderstanding," he said, forcing a laugh that sounded too sharp. "Ask her. She knows I didn't." Noah took one step closer. Rick stopped breathing. In the pause that followed, the hum of the fluorescent light seemed deafening. Emma could hear her heartbeat, could feel Noah's presence wrapping around her like armor. He didn't move fast, didn't shout. He simply reached up, closed the restroom door gently, and turned the lock again. The sound was quiet, final, terrifying. Rick swallowed hard. "What are you?" Noah's voice cut through him like glass. "You shut that door on her. Now you'll stand here and listen." It wasn't a threat. It was a sentence. Every instinct in Rick's body screamed to run, but something in Noah's eyes made him stay rooted to the spot. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. Noah's presence was like gravity, pulling the truth out of the corners where it had hidden too long. "Do you know what it's like," Noah said, his tone low, "to watch men hurt someone who can't fight back? To see them use power as a weapon because they think no one's watching?" He stepped closer, and Rick's breath hitched. "I've seen that. I've stopped that. And I'll stop it again." Emma's eyes filled, her breath trembling. The authority in Noah's voice wasn't just anger, it was memory. The battlefield had taught him how cruelty hides behind casual faces, how evil doesn't always carry a weapon. Sometimes it wears a name tag. Rick's voice shook. "You can't talk to me like that." "I'm her boss, not anymore," Noah said. The words hit like a hammer. Rick opened his mouth to speak again, but Noah's hand moved. Not to strike, not to hurt, but to simply raise his phone. A small red light blinked on. "Recording." "Say it again," he said softly. "Tell the camera what you just did. Tell her husband what you tried to do." Rick froze, sweat forming at his temple. "I didn't." His voice broke, the words tangling as he saw his reflection in the lens. For the first time, the power shifted completely. The predator was exposed under his own light. Noah didn't move closer. He didn't need to. The silence itself was a verdict. Rick's voice collapsed into mumbled excuses, a string of denials that grew weaker with every word until they disintegrated into the air. Then, quietly, Noah spoke again. "You're going to unlock that door and walk out. You're going to hand over your keys, and you're never going to come near her again. Not here, not anywhere." Rick's jaw clenched, but his body obeyed before his pride could resist. The lock clicked open. The sound carried through the hallway, like the first crack in a storm. Noah stepped aside, letting him pass, but his gaze followed with a precision that left no doubt. If Rick ever looked back, that would be his mistake. Rick stumbled out, shoulders tight, face pale. The restaurant noise swallowed him again, but this time the chatter felt distant, hollow. The world outside kept turning as if nothing had happened, but inside, something had shifted forever. Emma sank against the counter, her body trembling now that the danger had passed. Noah turned to her, his voice softer than she'd ever heard it. "You okay?" he asked. The question wasn't casual. It was weighted with the kind of care that only came from someone who had seen how fragile safety could be. Her answer came as a whisper. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't want to worry you." Noah shook his head slowly, stepping close enough for her to feel the calm rhythm of his breath. "You don't ever have to handle something like that alone." Her tears came without sound. She pressed her forehead against his chest, the warmth of him grounding her as the adrenaline ebbed away. For a long time, neither spoke. They just stood there, the soldier and the survivor, in the sterile light of the staff hallway that had just witnessed the worst of humanity and the quietest act of courage. But outside that fragile peace, trouble was already brewing. Rick hadn't gone far. Humiliation burned in his chest like acid, twisting into something darker. He'd lost his control, his mask shattered, and now all he could think of was revenge. On her, on the man who had exposed him. His pride wouldn't let it end here. And as the night deepened, Noah's instincts began to stir again. Something in the air, something unseen, whispered that the storm wasn't over yet. The night outside the restaurant was heavy with rain. The streets shimmered under streetlights, slick with reflections that bent and blurred like broken memories. Noah led Emma to the truck, his arms still around her shoulders. She didn't protest. She didn't speak. She didn't speak. The weight of what had almost happened pressed between them like an invisible wall. But his silence was steady, a promise more powerful than words. Inside the cab, the air was warm, the engine low and steady. Noah rested his hands on the steering wheel, staring through the windshield without really seeing. The soldier in him was awake now. Not the man who loved her, but the one who had survived too many nights where safety was an illusion. Every instinct screamed that the situation wasn't done. Predators didn't surrender easily. They regrouped, they schemed, they struck back when they thought the world wasn't watching. Emma shifted beside him. Her voice was small but certain. "He'll tell them lies. The owner, the staff, they'll believe him. I'll lose my job." She looked at him, guilt clouding her eyes. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet. Noah turned to her slowly, his jaw tightening. "You did the right thing. The truth isn't something you hide because it makes others comfortable." His tone softened. "People like him count on silence. You took that from him." She nodded, tears glinting in the dim light. "But what if—" "I'll handle it," he said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that made her believe him. "You just breathe." But as he drove her home through the rain, headlights cutting through the storm, he couldn't shake the feeling that the night wasn't finished writing its story. Not yet. Behind them, in the shadow of the restaurant's dumpster, Rick stood smoking under a dripping awning. The humiliation seared through him, deeper than the fear had. He could still feel Noah's gaze, that quiet surgical stare that stripped him of every illusion of control. His hands trembled as he took another drag, his mind spiraling into thoughts that had no place in reason. He'd tell the owner she was unstable, claim she was making things up. He'd twist the story, paint himself the victim. But beneath those rationalizations, something darker coiled, the raw, wounded pride of a man who couldn't accept defeat. He flicked the cigarette into the puddle and muttered, "You'll regret this, sweetheart." The following morning was thick with gray clouds. Emma woke before dawn, her mind still echoing with the events of the night before. Every sound, the hum of the refrigerator, the rustle of curtains, made her flinch. Noah wasn't home. He'd gone out early. A note sat on the kitchen table, written in his precise handwriting. "Getting coffee. Back soon. Lock the door." She smiled faintly at his protectiveness, though her stomach still felt tight. The bruises on her wrist were faint but visible, evidence of what she wished she could forget. She traced them lightly, trying to convince herself that everything was over, that Noah's presence had ended it. But deep down she knew better. Fear didn't vanish overnight. It hid behind the smallest noises. When she heard the knock at the door, she jumped. It was soft, rhythmic, familiar. She hesitated before peeking through the window. Standing on her porch, soaked from the drizzle, was Rick. Her heart dropped. He looked nothing like the swaggering manager from last night. His shirt clung to him, his face pale but determined. He smiled, a grotesque mimicry of civility. "Emma," he said through the door, voice muffled by the rain. "We need to talk. Just 5 minutes, please." Every instinct screamed no. She stepped back, gripping the countertop for balance. "You shouldn't be here," she said, voice trembling. "Leave before I call the police." He laughed quietly, the sound thin and bitter. "You think they'll believe you? I already talked to the owner. Told him you snapped. Said you were imagining things." He leaned closer to the glass, his eyes narrowing. "You're done at the restaurant. Might as well come out and finish this conversation." Her fingers hovered over her phone, but before she could dial, another sound cut through the tension, the low growl of a truck pulling up. Rick turned just as Noah stepped out. He didn't slam the door or shout. He simply stood there under the rain, still, composed, dangerous in his silence. The water ran off his jacket, glistening like armor. His eyes, calm but unreadable, locked onto Rick's face. "You're standing on my porch," he said, his voice quiet enough that the wind almost swallowed it. Rick straightened, forcing a nervous smile. "Hey, I just came to clear things up. No hard feelings. We're all adults, right?" Noah's gaze didn't move. "You had your chance to walk away." For a moment, neither man moved. The rain fell harder, pooling between them. Rick's false calm cracked, revealing the fear underneath. He tried to hold his ground, but Noah's presence filled the space like gravity. Every inch he stood closer made the world smaller for Rick. "You think you can scare me?" Rick said, but his voice betrayed him. "You can't touch me. I didn't do anything wrong." Noah tilted his head, almost pitying. "You dragged a woman into a locked room. You laid hands on her. And now you're standing here trying to convince her it didn't happen." He stepped forward, his tone dropping to a whisper. "That's not courage. That's desperation." Rick's hand twitched, half instinct, half defiance. "You think just because you're some military guy you can—" Noah moved so fast it was almost invisible. Not violent, not impulsive, but efficient. In one motion, he caught Rick's wrist mid-air, twisted gently but firmly until Rick dropped to one knee with a hiss of pain. Noah didn't raise his voice, didn't even look angry. His tone was level, surgical. "You're done coming near her. You're done pretending this is about work or misunderstandings. You're done hurting people weaker than you." Rick winced, his pride crumbling with every second. You're crazy. Noah's grip tightened for one heartbeat, just enough to send a message. Then he released him. Rick stumbled back, clutching his wrist, drenched and shivering. The false confidence drained from him completely. He took a step toward his car, muttering curses under his breath, but even those lacked conviction. When his car finally peeled away down the wet road, silence filled the air again. Emma stood at the doorway, tears mixed with rain on her cheek. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered, though her voice trembled with relief. Noah turned toward her, his expression softening. "I didn't want to," he said simply. "But sometimes silence gives men like him permission to keep going. I won't let that happen." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw not just the soldier, but the man who carried the weight of protecting what mattered most, even when it tore at his soul. But neither of them saw the car that had stopped a few blocks down, headlights off, engine idling. Rick hadn't gone home. His humiliation had curdled into something far worse. and as the rain blurred the world outside, Noah's instinct stirred again, the unmistakable feeling of danger lingering just beyond the edge of peace. The war he thought he'd left behind was coming home. The rain didn't stop that night. It came down in sheets, washing the streets clean, but leaving behind the heaviness that always follows after fear. Inside their small living room, Noah sat by the window, his fingers drumming softly against the armrest of the chair. He had that look again, distant, listening to something beyond what the ear could hear, the soldier's quiet, the kind that came right before trouble. Emma sat curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching him. "You think he'll come back?" she asked softly. Noah didn't answer right away. His gaze followed the shifting reflections of the streetlights on the puddled road. Finally, he said, "People like him don't take their defeat easily. But if he does," he paused, meeting her eyes, "he won't get close." His voice wasn't angry. It was steady, as if he were simply stating a fact. That steadiness comforted her, even as unease fluttered inside her chest. She tried to smile. "You can't protect me from everything." He leaned forward, his expression soft. "Maybe not, but I can make sure the people who try regret it." The words hung in the air like a promise. For a while, they sat in silence, listening to the steady rhythm of rain on the roof. Emma felt safe for the first time in weeks, but she didn't know that beyond the corner of the street, headlights had cut through the darkness once again. A car engine idled quietly. Rick sat behind the wheel, eyes bloodshot, knuckles white against the steering wheel. The humiliation from earlier had metastasized into something unrecognizable. Blind anger, shame disguised as revenge. His breath fogged the windshield as he muttered to himself, trying to drown out the voice in his head that kept replaying the moment Noah had stared him down. He couldn't stand it. That look, that quiet superiority. He'd come to make it even. He stepped out, rain soaking through his clothes instantly. His mind raced. No plan, no logic, just fury leading him like a leash. He moved around to the back of the house. Footsteps muffled by mud and water. Through the window, he could see Emma's silhouette, her head leaning on Noah's shoulder. He pulled something from his pocket. A metal flashlight, heavy and cold. His reflection wavered in the window glass, pale, hollow, desperate. Inside, Noah's body stiffened, years of instinct condensed into a single breath. He stood without speaking, his hand lifting slightly, signaling Emma to stay back. Her heart began to pound, but she didn't argue. She'd seen that look before, in photographs, in stories, in the shadows that sometimes followed him home. Noah moved to the door quietly, barefoot, each step soundless. The rain masked his movement. The darkness outside swallowed him whole. Rick froze when he turned and found nothing where the window's reflection should have been. Just the rain, just the night, then a voice behind him. "You really don't learn, do you?" Rick spun, his heart leaping. Noah stood there, unmoving, his face calm but cold. The flashlight slipped slightly in Rick's hand. "You think you scare me?" he spat, though his voice quivered. "You can't do anything now. You touch me, I'll call the cops. I'll tell them you attacked me first. You'll lose everything." Noah stepped closer, the rain pooling around his boots. "I'm not touching you," he said quietly. "I'm reminding you." "Reminding me of what?" "That there's a line," Noah said, "and you crossed it." For a moment, the two men stood in the storm, one burning with hollow rage, the other radiating silent control. Rick tried to lunge forward, raising the flashlight like a weapon, but Noah sidestepped effortlessly. The soldier's training surfaced smooth and merciless. He caught Rick's arm mid-swing, twisted it just enough to make him drop the flashlight. The metal clattered into a puddle. In the same motion, Noah pinned him against the fence, not with anger but precision. "Listen to me," Noah said. His voice a low growl drowned beneath the rain. "You come near her again, you even think about her. I won't need to lay a hand on you. I'll make sure every door in this town closes on you. Every job, every chance gone. Because men like you don't deserve power. They deserve to live with what they are." Rick's breath came out in ragged gasps. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "You think you're better than me," he rasped. "You're just a killer wearing a uniform." Noah's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped back slowly, letting Rick stumble to the ground. "The difference," Noah said, "is I learned what to do with the darkness. You let it own you." Rick scrambled to his feet and ran. No more words, no more defiance, just the sound of footsteps fading into the night. Noah stood there for a long moment, letting the rain wash over him. The tension drained from his shoulders, leaving only exhaustion in its place. He turned back toward the house, where Emma stood at the door, her eyes wide and wet with tears. He walked toward her, and when he reached her, she didn't speak. She just wrapped her arms around him and held on, trembling. Inside, the house was warm again, and the world outside seemed distant. Emma pressed her cheek against his chest and whispered, "You could have hurt him." Noah shook his head. "That's not justice. That's just another wound." She looked up at him then, really looked, and saw the man beneath the soldier, the one who carried his discipline like armor and his empathy like a quiet scar. For the first time that night, she smiled. "You came back from war," she said softly, "but maybe it never left you." He nodded faintly, a shadow of a smile in return. "Maybe, but as long as I have something worth protecting, it's a fight I'll keep winning." They stood there in silence, the rain easing into a soft drizzle. The world felt fragile but alive. Outside, the storm finally passed, and the first hint of dawn crept over the horizon, pale light spilling across the wet street, touching everything with the quiet forgiveness of morning. Emma leaned into him, her voice barely a whisper. "Thank you." Noah's arms tightened around her. "You never have to thank me for loving you." And with that, the night that had begun in fear ended in fragile peace, not because the world was safe, but because they had faced its darkness together and refused to be broken by it. The soldiers' war was over, at least for now. The woman's silence had become strength, and somewhere in the soft hum of the waking city, the sound of rain gave way to the promise of something new, not victory but survival, steady and unshaken.